May I please welcome Mr. Chetan Parekh, Managing Partner, Cedar Management Consulting.
So the panel is about fostering FinTech innovation in the digital ecosystem. So let me first invite my esteemed panelists. So the first panelist is Ahmed Albalooshi. Ahmed, of course, as all of you know, in Bahrain, has been a CEO and a board member in multiple organizations and comes with a series of FinTech innovations which he is personally building. Ahmed, very warm welcome. Next on the panel is Ahmed Saleh. Ahmed Saleh, warm welcome, is a business head for Tap Payments. As many of you know, in Bahrain, Tap Payment is trying to bring in the next generation e-commerce and payments. My third panel member, please. My third panel member is esteemed Chief Risk Officer of Gulf Finance House Financial, Bhaskar Menon. Bhaskar, warm welcome. Bhaskar comes with significant amount of years of experience in investments, risk, and again, a very, very unique perspective. My fourth panelist is again on digital, is coming from Allica Bank. He will be likely to be on Zoom, Conrad Ford. So Conrad is Chief Product and Strategy Officer at Allica Bank. He's joining us. Hi Conrad, I hope you can hear us well.
I can. Hello everyone.
Excellent. So with that, let me start the panel. Excellent. So warm welcome, guys. Thanks for joining me in the panel. And of course, the most important question today is FinTechs are coming in. And FinTechs are going to be part of the banking ecosystem. And the whole experience which FinTech brings, fostering the whole innovation. As all of us can honestly say, banks are not the best place in the world to be innovative. You are risk-focused organizations. You think twice before investing money in someone. So innovation is somewhere exactly opposite. And where you should be willing to take a risk, you should be willing to look at the new ideas and how I can commercialize. So again, my first question is to Ahmed. Ahmed, when you look at FinTech ecosystem in Bahrain, and it has evolved over the last 4 years since open banking was announced, and FinTech came together, what do you see as some of the notable achievements and where you've seen this coming through from an ecosystem perspective?
Thank you. So I think if we're talking about FinTechs in Bahrain, I believe maybe the year 2017 was the catalyst of change, okay? Because in 2017, there was a significant milestones that happened in terms of, let's say, Central Bank of Bahrain creating a unit for innovation and FinTech. The same year where Bahrain FinTech Bay was also incorporated. And since then, it was a series of laws, regulations that really helped fostering and have a framework between banks and FinTech to collaborate. And I think also the significant milestone that is happening in 2017 was the regulatory sandbox. Here where innovators, entrepreneurs who had ideas, new technology, had a framework to come and explore that with the central bank. So I think 2017 was pivotal to Bahrain FinTech landscape. And since then, we've seen a lot of regulations coming in, crowdfunding, crypto assets, and so on. And most importantly, open banking, which is where banks and FinTech have a framework to collaborate. So I think 2017 was critical for Bahrain. And since then, Bahrain played a very important role in setting the direction in the GCC and even in the Middle East when it comes to regulations. And now we can see in the scene of Bahrain, we have only maybe this year or the year last, we have 3 crowdfunding companies. We have payment, which I will not take it from our brother Ahmed, is flourishing as well. So I think we have that framework was set by the regulators to collaborate between banks and FinTech, and I think that's the very critical for the ecosystem.
So you heard me earlier, right, that one of the key successes as a strategist we see for the banks is to collaborate and leverage FinTech across domains. Now you've looked at payments, you've looked at crowdfunding, BNPL, Kunal spoke about earlier in terms of one of the major areas. So when you look at these different domains, are they linked to certain specific problems Bahrain has, or it's just a set of innovations coming in and then government picks it up? So how does this get organized in Bahrain?
It's very hard to say because, if we look at banks, you have banks focusing on retail, banks focusing on corporate. SMEs is a bit neglected, let me say that. Okay, and there are the financial inclusion, which is also a very important point. So I think banks focus on product and services, unfortunately. And if this is what you're looking at, innovation would be a challenge, whereby maybe FinTechs look at into serving non-customers or serving unsatisfied customers. So they will look at the market and present their solutions. But it comes from a regulator perspective. Also, regulators will look at what's happening around the world, and if it fits Bahrain, then regulation will put in place. So all these regulations that we have now is looking at a global perspective and see what is locally applicable to Bahrain. So it's inside out, outside in, views that will establish the ecosystem.
Excellent. So as I understand, I think it's going to be a customer driven as well as the problem solving from a bank perspective. And on FinTech perspective, as far as you have a large impact, as we say, on the problem solving and growth, there is a strong success. Ahmed, Saleh, when you look at, again, from a tap payment or payment as an industry, what do you think are the main factors for a robust ecosystem so that you build an ecosystem which is sustainable and grow and scale?
Thank you, first of all. Thank you, everyone. I think building a robust foundation across 4 main pillars, which could be the regulatory framework, plus talents and demand from the market, alongside with the, so we said demand and investment, of course. So, and it's been very obvious, not only in Bahrain, but majorly in Bahrain, throughout the presentation in the beginning of this summit, wherein Bahrain have built a robust open banking framework from a regulatory perspective, which is really attractive for lots of fintech players in the region to step in, get into sandbox, and working alongside with the regulators. And I think that in the past maybe 4 or 5 years, there have been lots of back and forth between the fintech companies and the regulators, hand in hand, with moving to the same mission of building this robust ecosystem. Additional to that, as we all know, that there are lots of initiatives to support developing talents in the market, either through Bahrain FinTech Bay, which in TAP, we're very proud to say that we've been one of the members who really been there in the beginning. And of course, Tamkeen initiated a program in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, to support fintech or developing fintech talent in the market. That's a very important part. Demand, of course, as you said, Ahmed, as everyone knows, that every fintech company is focusing on different direction. I mean, there is some sort of figuring it out, right? So, but all of these things are based on how customer-centric you are. Building great product innovation, but there is no use case for this product, it doesn't make any sense, right? So listening to SMEs, which has been really neglected, as you said, that's one of our core in TAP. And yeah, that's it.
And when you look at the maturity of these parameters, because again, see, Bahrain has founded this. Today you see in GCC, most countries would be following a framework which Bahrain set up for open banking, for payments, for e-commerce. So when you look at the maturity today compared to what we were 5 years back, how do you see across these parameters which you mentioned, the maturity, and what more can be done to ensure the fintech like yours get further foundation support?
Great. So the start is from the regulator part, right? Bahrain is very open, as Ahmed said, to lots of fintech innovations, be it payments, be it crypto, be it open banking, and so on. So if you create the foundation of this from a regulatory perspective, that means that you're creating the ecosystem which will be mature up when we go. If we say that Bahrain is fully mature, I don't think any country in the world is fully mature. It's a space full of innovation, full of changes, very dynamic. And I think that we reached to a good level of maturity on this in particular. Other than that, we know that there is a big talent gap in the market, but there is progressing, right? And as long that there is progressing, it means that we're moving to the right direction. When it comes to capital or investment, we all see that fintechs are investing millions, if not billions, around the world to figure it out, right? I mean, what we start or what we think that the customer needs now, it might be change when we go along, right? So it's dynamic. Nothing is yet mature. Not gonna be mature anytime soon. It will take time. And again, the collaboration between fintech and banks is very crucial, very important. Because fintech won't be able to innovate if there is not enough support from the banking sector itself.
Interesting. So that brings me to my next panelist. And again, Bhaskar, you've looked at this from a very, very different eyes. Coming from GFH and investment background, when you look at either investing in a fintech, right, or look at it from a risk perspective, if you can reflect, how do you see fintechs and what do you see in fintechs for valuing them from an investment perspective? And if there is an advice you have for the fintechs, what would that be to ensure that you build a sustainable ecosystem?
Thanks, Chetan, and thanks, Cedar, and everyone for having me here. I think the first thing, as you said, that from investment perspective, when we look at things, and even from investment, I am from risk background. So for me, everything I try to see is that what could go wrong. And when you look at fintechs, it's an emerging technology, and we know that every single day we have heard from all the panelists that technology is changing every day. So that there are key things. First thing, when we look at fintech, is that what is the business feasibility for this particular fintech? So yes, there is a use case, as Ahmed just now mentioned, that you bring a fintech, but the use case realize that there is no requirement, it doesn't make sense. So the business feasibility is the first thing that we always look. That is it feasible, just not just now. We are talking about 3 to 5 years. So that duration, that investment horizon, will it give us what we are expecting? That's the first thing. The second thing which we always look at is the regulatory challenges. We all know that every fintech will come at some point and it will face some sort of regulatory challenges. It could be because of data privacy, it could be because of cross-border data, it could be because of cross-jurisdictions. Every jurisdiction is different. What you are doing in Bahrain will have some different regulations in UAE or Saudi or outside GCC. So you need to see what is the feasibility of that particular fintech. So that's another area which we always see. Third, another crucial area which we always see is the management. When you bring a fintech, it's a good concept. Concept looks good, but who is backing it? Is the management or the people running that fintech are technologically capable, passionate about the product or not? Because you see fintech, everybody comes and there is a thought behind every fintech. There is a concept behind every fintech. So you need to understand that will the management be with that concept for a good long time, or is this just a concept that you have to again roll over to something else? So this is another area we always look. In terms of advice, probably I would say, I was talking to Mr. Ram also when he was saying that metaverse. This is one of the key industry right now. And probably if you see, one of the example which I read was the digital fashion industry. And it is said that this is almost $60 billion industry, where you don't even have to physically own an asset. You digitally own an asset, and it will put on your image, and that's it. And that industry is a $60 billion industry. So I think what is important is that when you look at FinTechs, you also need to look at, can this be applied globally? You don't want a specific product to cater one population only or one region only. And that is becoming very important these days, that be it e-commerce or be it other FinTech products, can it cater to the population globally? Because that's where you see the scope. That is another area we look. And probably the last advice where I would see, another buzzword which you see in the investment industry these days is ESG. Everybody will go for ESG. That's a fact. Is it environmentally conscious? Can it cover the social angle? How good is the governance? And probably this is a good area where, yes, there are a lot of products and there are a lot of FinTechs which are looking, but this is an area where you would see a lot of potential in the whole investment space. Everybody will look for, is the FinTech ESG compliant or not? And there are a lot of ESG compliant FinTech, which digital finance, fashion industry, which I'm talking about, you can say it is because you are not actually physically making any product. So environmentally, you can say it is a conscious product. But yeah, these are some of my thoughts.
Very interesting. And when you look at risk and a governance and a government or a regulatory playing a role, again, Bahrain regulator has been a very on an edge of technology acceptance. They were the first to open up cloud. Nobody in banking imagined that the cloud will be opened up. Looking at them, many GCC markets are changing today, saying if Bahrain can allow, why can't we, right? So when you look at the government and regulators playing a FinTech innovation, again, do you see, how do you keep a balance between innovation and to maintain the stability and the security in the financial system, which is a primary role of a regulator? So what would you see as a balance there?
That's a very good question, Chetan. And I'll tell you what, when we look, when again, Bahrain, when I read and when I hear, was at the forefront of FinTech revolution. And we have seen the products here and the technologies here. I think what is key part when you talk about the regulatory sandboxes, it's very important from a regulator perspective that these use cases are passed through all these sandboxes and the regulations are made around it. But over and out, what happens is that at times there are a lot of regulations. So what the right approach always could be, which we use in the investment industry also, is a risk-based approach. So you look what are the regulations or what are the key risks that FinTech industry is focusing. And probably regulations around them should be more stringent, because then it gives good innovation capability to FinTech to grow, because then they don't have to deal with all the regulations. But at the same time, you can focus on most important things. Like one of the panelists said that data privacy is a big issue these days. You need to be very careful, because the more you bring technology, the easier it is to leak the data. And there is a research that almost 90% of the cyber incidents happen because of the software flaws. That's the problem. So when you make a FinTech, what is the development life cycle? Is it strong enough? Are you doing all the data audits or not? Is the data secured when it is at static condition and when is it in transit mode? Both the situations. So I think probably these are the areas where regulator and probably FinTechs and investors can work together and see what is the right balance, where you need to have data privacy also, but at the same time you want innovation also. So I think that's how we look at things.
Excellent. I think very interesting risk perspective. So moving to Conrad, to you, again, you are looking at a very different market. We just spoke earlier in the conference about maturity of Europe and how Europe looks at things. So when you look at the challenges that FinTech startups face, maybe you are really ahead of the curve for many of us. So what would you see as the key startup challenges? And especially when entering new markets, because FinTechs really do not have any boundaries or markets.
Hi everyone. So for those that don't know my background, before I did my current role, which is building a new bank focused on SMEs, actually, I noticed the reference to SMEs earlier. I actually founded one of London's earliest FinTechs. So I founded a business called Funding Options, which when I founded it, there were probably a few dozen FinTechs in London. There's now thousands. So London's been through an extraordinary journey in the FinTech space. Numerically, London has more FinTech companies than any other place in the world. So yeah, I mean, from the perspective of sort of scaling up, which I think is kind of the most important stage, because starting a business early, getting a business to scale up stage is what really matters. And it's the scale up stage is really what will drive a really big ecosystem for reasons I'll get into in a second. So this is kind of my third scale up journey, in the bank I'm at now, Allica Bank, and actually setting a personal best, we grew 5 times last year in revenue terms. So I've kind of been through this scale up journey before. And the observations I would make is from an ecosystem perspective. So firstly, funding. For a long time in London, for most of London's FinTech journey, it was a lot easier to raise early stage capital than it was to raise scale up capital, particularly Series A. So, except for a short period at the peak of the bubble, there was what was called the Valley of Death. So you could easily raise a few £100,000 or maybe £1 million, and you could raise £20 million at a certain scale, but there was a Valley of Death in between. And interestingly, the government tried to do a lot about this, but my experience was that generally speaking, government intervention in that funding gap didn't really work. And I'd say the reason is because it tends to attract the wrong startups. In other words, when you read news stories about government intervention in financing scale-up businesses, you often it was scale-up businesses that you knew were kind of bottom of the core. So that kind of funding Valley of Death, there's no easy answer, but Series A in particular is a particularly hard area in our world of financial services in tech. I'd say the second one is around mindset. There's a certain mindset you need to grow very quickly a business to kind of get through that Valley of Death. And there isn't really an MBA school for it. What I often say to my colleagues is, in a scale-up business, there's always fires burning. You just can't allow a fire to be raging. In other words, if something goes really badly wrong, everybody needs to jump on it. You must accept the fact that there are fires burning across the business. In other words, if there are not fires burning, then you're not growing quickly enough. And that's actually a very difficult mindset, by the way, for incumbent banks, for traditional financial institutions. That's not how they work. But if you want to grow a business quickly and grow a great business, you have to be willing to do that. I have to have that conversation. So how do you build an ecosystem of people who've got that mindset? Unfortunately, there's no cheat code for that. There's no shortcut. You have to hire people who've been there and done it. So in other words, in a scale up, you find people who've done scale up. The next one is around people. The single most important role for a leader in a scale-up, rapidly scaling business, is to attract and retain the best people. Nothing else comes close. I mean, what I regularly say to my leadership colleagues is, when we're 10 times bigger, you can't work 10 times harder. Yeah. They're doing 70-hour weeks. There literally aren't enough weeks. They're working 70-hour weeks. You can't make up further hours in a week. So attracting and retaining people, and I would say the number one challenge for FinTechs until very recently in London was lack of talent. So there's kind of like really hardcore technology and data skills. Design is another one. A year ago, I spent most of my time hiring, and generally speaking, I wasn't able to hire the level of experience and talent that I was looking for. That's markedly changed in the last year, but obviously for the wrong reasons, which is we are now in a challenging economic circumstance. But coming back to my point about mindset, how you build that base of talent, I don't know a shortcut for that, unless you ship people in from the other ecosystems. And then the final one is a regulatory point. Regulators in London, I would say, on balance, have done an excellent job in supporting FinTech. They were certainly in open banking. Open banking was initially a kind of European or EU piece of regulation, but London did it really well. In other words, they made a really elegant delivery rather than pure statute. But in the end, regulators will never move fast enough for rapidly scaling businesses. And one calendar quarter is a very short period in time for a regulator, but it can be life or death for a scale up if they've got the milestones to hit for the next funding raise. So mysteriously losing a quarter while you're waiting for a regulator to decide something is really catastrophic for a startup, for a scale up. But I'm not sure there's a shortcut to that, because in the end, regulators have a primary responsibility, as someone just pointed out, is stability of the financial system. Just very briefly touching on new markets. So the business I founded, we expanded internationally. And I'll say the biggest question you face is, do you go for the biggest market, or do you go for the most similar? So let me just unpick that. In UK banking, the most similar markets are Australia, Scandinavia, so Sweden, Denmark, etc., and the Netherlands. They're very similar to the UK, and they all speak English very well. But all of them are small, yeah? So the question you face is, do you go big or go home? So in other words, do you go to the US, which is a very different market, but is 10, 20 times bigger than your home market, or do you go and do the easy option and learn international expansion? I took the easy option. I went to the Netherlands, which I didn't regret, because generally speaking, the US, albeit being 20 times bigger than the UK, has been basically a death zone for UK startups. And actually, I went on a trade delegation there, and I learned from them actually that you think you're entering one huge market, you're actually entering 50 markets, because they have state level regulation. So international expansion is hard, but the real question is, do you go for the next small market, or do you go for the big one? And there is no simple answer to that question.
Very, very interesting insights for scaling up and again going across markets. So again, that brings me to a second question, that now that FinTech ecosystem is building, it's been 3 to 5 years based on different early stage FinTechs ongoing and solving the problems. If you have to give an advice as a panel members, right, for them to succeed in the digital ecosystem, as well as what factors would make a success, because it's different factors for different businesses. So Ahmed, I'll start with you again. What do you think will be your advice to the FinTechs?
For the FinTechs, I think it's very important to select the right partners, okay? Because when I was on the other side, when I was in the banking industry, the challenge would be from banking side is, what would this FinTech company bring to me, yeah? And still there's the concept that, and unfortunately still happening, that a lot of banks, when you say FinTech, it's like going to a solution provider and deploying a software. That's a FinTech. But as we know, FinTech is a more broader or more disruptive sense. So I think from that side, from that banking mindset, it's very important to select the right partner and have a strategy for growth in that ecosystem. Because in digital, there are opportunities and there are threats. How would you capitalize on the opportunities to grow your market? So from banking perspective, it's a challenge, it's a culture, it's the monetization aspect of it. It is, you know, we are big and they are small. Why would we need to collaborate? But if we go from a FinTech mindset, which I am now, is that you also need to grow. So banks have more access to capital. Banks have more customer base. If that partnership could be a win-win, that would be excellent. But we also have to be careful as FinTech, is because culture's innovation is also something drastic than what we are, you know? As you said, they are more, banks are more risk averse, you know, and you know, they have a lot of governance and so on. So be very careful when you partner with banks, as in there's not the concept of death by culture, that your culture is a mismatch, but there are also benefits. So explore these opportunities that have win-win situation and you have some strategic alignment. And also it's very important that there is the ecosystem. We spoke about Bahrain FinTech Bay, which facilitates such introductions and collaboration, but most importantly, there are a framework on a country level that also regulates how banks and FinTech work together, how they exchange information and so on. So this is also like a safety net for such a relationship. So it's very important that also FinTech look at a strategic alignment when collaborating with banks.
So very interesting. So you're saying, one, the partner they choose, the strategic alignment, and look at the cultural alignment as well. So very, very interesting perspective. Moving to Ahmed, Saleh, when you have to look at advising FinTech, and you've done it yourself, and you've been going through the journey of growth. So what would be your lessons which you would recommend a FinTech to keep in mind and do differently?
I would say that FinTech is part of a larger industry, right? So collaboration is very important. Not only collaboration with banks, collaboration with other FinTechs as well. What I've seen in the industry that every FinTech company goes towards a different direction, or mainly providing a different set of a product to the customer. So if we will just funnel it up, that everything goes to customers at the end, right? So customer centricity, understanding the problems that you are up to solve, that's one thing. Being very close to the regulators, not to mention how important is the cybersecurity part as well. Another thing is that we know that for FinTechs to expand their operations across multiple markets, like what TAP did, will bring lots of different set of experience from different markets. So just if you will look at how fragmented the GCC region, if we take GCC region as an example, considering that the way that Saudi operates is similar to Bahrain or similar to UAE, that's a big mistake. And I think that there are lots of lessons to be taken from each market. Combining all these lessons together will come up with a good framework to start with.
Excellent. Very, very interesting. So right from collaboration to learning from different markets and focusing on your customer and solving finally the key problem, which is where your value gets created.
Exactly, yeah.
Yep. Interesting. Bhaskar, your view?
I think the first thing probably, as I said, that FinTechs have to beef up their own regulations. At times, it's good that we all know that regulations are changing, technologies are changing, but there are certain level of governance controls or regulatory requirements that you can do it yourself. And that's the first thing to start, that certain level of governance in terms of right at every stage of the FinTech, right from the development life cycle of your code to the level where you have to handle the customer data. Till that level, there needs to be certain sort of regulatory mechanisms or certain sort of governance mechanism which they need to be, every FinTech has to beef up from time to time. And that's the key one thing. Second thing is this, yes, we are talking about the financial industry and banking and everything, but I think there is a broader implementation of FinTech, which is probably these days in property, you can see PropTech, or probably in the logistics sector. These are another areas where Bahrain has huge potential to implement FinTech. And you would see a lot of these things would come. So these are the areas which FinTechs can keep on looking, that there's a broader view where you can implement FinTech solutions which would be much beneficial for overall organization. And the third thing probably is when you look at the cross-body, right? I mean, every country is at a different stage of FinTech right now. Europe is at a different stage, India is at a different stage, even the region is at a different stage. What FinTechs can do is some sort of a regional harmony. When you can do this digital feedback is given, and you utilize this regional harmony, what is happening across the border, and utilize this to bring the product for the region also. That is always helpful, because like European Union has products, you can build something which is purely catering to GCC. You know, so those are the things which they have an advantage. So if you use this regional harmony, that would be an amazing thing for FinTechs to grow. Excellent.
So governance, risk, and improving internal data standards, as well as going to the consortiums and markets and get a feedback. I think very interesting. Moving, Conrad, to you, when you look at, again, you have a first-hand experience of setting up FinTechs and scaling them. So when you look at what are the key things to success, and how do you see these factors contributing to the success? If you can give your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I spend a lot of time with early stage fintech founders here in Europe, and the commonest mistake I see actually is that most of them, I think, understand you need to be attacking a big market, addressing a big market to have any chance of raising serious money and building a big business. But actually, they don't tend to, a lot of them don't tend to understand that the market has to have major challenges. In other words, there has to be major issues with the customers in that market. So a real example would be here in the UK, sort of mainstream consumer banking is very well served by the big banks, the big incumbents. If you go head to head with them in that sort of core market, then eventually, if you get to a certain scale, eventually they're going to respond and it won't be to your benefit. So you need to find not just a big market, but also one that has significant challenges for customers. So in Allica Bank, where I work now, we're focused on a particular area of the SME market, which the big banks really struggle with. In other words, they're not going to fight us very hard as we grow our market share, and indeed they probably can't fight us even if they try. So make sure that you're not just addressing a big market, but also one with big problems. And to sort of bring that into perspective, the big incumbents, they have almost everything in their favour. You know, they've got huge customer bases, huge brands, huge distribution. They're like super tankers. And you have none of those things. So it is, you know, it's not the case, as people say, that you have to 10x them to beat them, but you certainly have to x them or multiple x them. You have to do multiple times better at what you do than they do. You know, to get away with a super tanker in their main lane is not a good idea. So that's kind of point number one. Once you've and nuance in financial services, you probably also need somebody who understands financial services in your family team. You know, it's easy to find in London, it's easy to find high quality tech and product people. It's very rare to find high quality tech and product people who come from financial services because they don't get that training within the big incumbent banks. So in your founding team, you need somebody who really understands the market. Obviously, there's the regulatory aspect, but ultimately, financial services is a very nuanced industry. And of course, if you're lending, for example, it's not just about how much you sell, it's all about how much you get paid back. And then kind of the final piece of advice is actually a Jeff Bezos quote, which I love. Jeff Bezos of Amazon. He said, Amazon is stubborn on the vision and flexible on the details. So once you've figured out the bigger picture of what you're going to be, you'd be very stubborn about that, yeah, because otherwise you'll just wander in many directions. But you must be flexible on the details because almost everything you assume about your customers, your channels, your product will turn out to be wrong. So have your bigger picture, what's the big market problem you're going to go and solve, but then actually just deal with the fact that you're going to find out the hard way that everything you thought was wrong.
Excellent. So very, very interesting piece of advice from the panel around selecting your partnerships carefully, be very clear what you mean to the bank and what bank means to you, looking at your customer from Ahmed Saleh's perspective and look at feedback from the market. Each market is different, even in GCC. Governing and the risk, looking at it very, very carefully from day one. And last but not the least, not always biggest market gives you biggest returns. It is, are you solving the right problem, right? So that's in a nutshell is what we've heard today. I'll open up now for questions from the group. Please feel free with your questions. So if there are no questions, that means we are very good or we didn't speak relevant, yeah? Anyway, thank you. Okay, there's one question there. Can you give a mic there on the corner?
Or they're waiting for lunch, maybe.
So, my name is Mohammed Mahmoud. I've noticed that digital banking is mostly focused on retail rather than corporate. So my question is, within the next 3 years, will we be focusing, especially in our region, will we focus more on corporate side or will it be on consumer or retail side?
Excellent. Thank you so much for the question. A very, very relevant question, I would say. So I'll open it up to the panel to give their perspective around where do you see for SMEs and corporates the digital banking?
Yeah, maybe I just high-level points is why digital banks focus on retail is because it's easier segment to tackle, and when you go to SMEs, there's a level of risks that is associated with it as well. That's why you even see now conventional banks don't target SMEs because of the same level of risk. Now, here's the beautiful thing about FinTechs is that they know that SMEs, small businesses are unserved market or maybe even unsatisfied market, and they go and provide a value proposition. Here where you see crowdfunding is beautiful for SMEs, because if they cannot get the required funding, whether it's debt or equity, they can go to such platforms, and individuals like us could fund through crowdsourcing. So that's the challenge with SMEs in general, and that's why digital banks don't focus on them. There are attempts, not here in Bahrain, but other parts in the world, that there are digital banks that are focusing on SMEs. If we see more of this here in Bahrain and the region, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, just to add to this, in UAE, right, which is little different market compared to the Bahrain, there are a couple of organizations which are doing notable move. One is called AGTB. AGTB is world's first digital trade finance bank. So they do complete digital trade digitally, right? Second bank, View, which is founded by Abu Dhabi government through ADQ. They've just opened up first digital corporate bank for SMEs, which allows right from account opening to customer journeys to working capital finance journeys digitally. And nothing is manual there. These are all 40, 50 people team doing interesting apps. So it is very much on the cards, and I'm sure it will come in Bahrain as well. But it always follows a retail journey typically. That's what we've seen. Yeah? Any other questions? Yep. Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all the panelists for a wonderful session. Hope you enjoyed the conversation.